We now take a look at the markets and what's happening on our trade today. To get an in-depth view on how the market is trading is Burgess. He's a portfolio manager at Nedbank, a private wealth. Very good afternoon to you, Carl.
Good to see you, Michelle.
Let's talk about North Korea and get it out of the way. Very interesting how they've just gotten sanctions and they decide, okay, we'll forget about that and fire another missile over Japan.
Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic that's at play because, if you look at it on the one hand, South Korea, which is broadly seen as an ally to, well, the US is seen as an ally to South Korea, China is seen as an ally to North Korea. So, yeah, it really is a sort of a brazen attempt to kind of just continue this saber rattling that's been happening between the US, Donald Trump essentially and Kim Jong-un. So, not a situation, because essentially what this means for investors is, at the end of the day, that this is just sort of contributing to the noise that's happening in global markets. And obviously the threat of sort of nuclear war is never really a fantastic thing.
And we know how market participants hate volatility and the noise that comes, especially political noise.
Correct, yeah. So, but again, it's it is becoming a very political game, because if you have a look at it, North Korea derives probably about 80% of their revenues, or certainly their 80% of trading happens with China. So China does really have the power to throttle the economy and really bring it to its knees. But again, they don't probably want to do that. I mean, they're probably seen as a bit of a buffer between themselves and the US allied South Korea. So certainly a lot of politics at play, and it's not quite as simple as just nuclear war and hydrogen bombs and things like that. There's certainly a lot happening around it and a lot happening in terms of trade. So it's something that's very interesting. We're keeping a close eye on it.
Indeed, we've got the UN Security Council to meet on this latest nuclear test by North Korea, but we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that. Bringing it back to our markets, we've got the JC in negative territory at midday. No surprises, given the fact that we did have a negative day yesterday and the bit of uncertainty that is in the market currently.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty soft week. There hasn't been a lot of company results out that can really push the market higher. That being said, Aspen released some pretty solid set of numbers yesterday, but by and large, a lot of companies that would have reported their full year or half year numbers have basically finished reporting. So it's a pretty quiet time in the markets, and we are sort of just floating a bit lower from that 60 or 56,000 level. So a lot of the blue chips that have rallied quite a bit, particularly with banks, we're seeing them coming off. The likes of Cura also pulling back a little bit. So that's just a bit of negativity, broad-based negativity. And then of course we've seen throughout the week, gold and platinum that's really slid back a little bit. Gold last week was sitting well above 1350. At the moment we're looking at about 1326 if I'm not mistaken. So that's pulled back, and gold miners of course have pulled back in line with that. But big moves on the rand. So we're well above 13 and 1326 at the moment, I think. So that should provide some impetus for some moves in some of the bigger industrials. We've certainly seen them from the likes of Anheuser-Busch, which by and large for the last sort of 12 months has been pretty flat and trading around that 1500 level. So there certainly is something for us to sort of trade into and to react on. But unfortunately the market just we're losing maybe a bit of patience, I think, with so much noise around here.
But a little bit of excitement expected on the markets. We've got Steinhoff Retail Africa pricing its initial public offering. What did you make of that?
Yeah, so I think it's a very attractive asset that they are listing. It's a very big business. I mean, as you alluded to, over 4,800 stores. That's across Southern Africa. So really, I mean, 30% of their business only comes from the rest of Africa. So that really provides them some impetus to growth. But if you have a look at the numbers, they guided for between, I think, 18 and 23 rand per share to be listing at. It came in at 20 rand 50 cents. And we saw the reaction from the market being quite positive. That was 4.8 times oversubscribed. So not completely surprising. So I suppose what that means for investors is if you've applied for shares, you're likely to get about 20% of what you've applied for. So the business is listing at it's not exactly cheap. It's it'll be trading at around 18 times earnings, and they're giving you a 3% dividend yield. But if you look at Ackermans and Pep, which are probably their two flagship sort of operations, these are very cash generative businesses. They target a segment that has generally been sort of neglected by other retailers. And I think it's often overlooked that Pep for the last 18 years has really produced double-digit profit growth, consistently, which is, I don't think a lot of businesses in South Africa can say that they've done that, through all sorts of different cycles. So certainly an attractive offering, but again, like all these things, it boils down to pricing.
Are you going to go for it?
I think I'll wait for a little bit. I didn't apply myself personally, but I certainly will be keeping a very close eye on it.
All right, I just want to quickly read a story that's just come in. KPMG CEO Trevor Hall and 7 others have quit over the hashtag Gupta leaks and SARS rogue unit report. We'll have more on that as the day progresses. Well, we've got this KPMG story. I'm not sure whether you want to comment, but it's in the news with the Gupta leaks.
Yeah, it's certainly keeping a lot of big businesses on their toes, and it certainly speaks to the role that civil society has played in all of this, and particularly journalism as well. I think that a lot of guys that have dealt with the Guptas in the past, and certainly service providers to other listed companies, are really coming under pressure at the moment. So we'll continue to watch it very closely, as I'm sure a lot of South Africans will.
Definitely do that. Well, Dangote Cement throwing its hat in the ring for PPC. Now, going against AfriSam, how do you see this one likely playing out?
So I think, if we look at PPC going back sort of 5 years, this is a business that was trading at 36 Rand a share. And if you look at that in terms of the current environment, which is pretty low growth, cement prices are under pressure. It's trading at just over 6 Rand a share. It has fallen to as low as 4 Rand a share. I'm not surprised. It's got a big presence in Southern Africa, so I'm not surprised that some of the other bigger players in terms of its competition are looking at it to take it over. I believe that there's a company in Greece that's also looking to possibly acquire it. You've got obviously Dangote, and then you've got the kind of Canadian business that is looking to buy 2 billion rands worth of shares. So that's a significant stake. And I think any time a business with such significant exposure to Southern Africa that's come under such pressure, and look, it's got issues, and I think that they're unresolved issues still with the board. So I'm not surprised that there's a lot of interest in it, and I just hope for current shareholders that this maybe sweetens the deal with increased competition around it.
Next week, what kind of results can we expect out this week? Like you said a little earlier, pretty dry, but we did have some heavyweights like Aspen.
Yeah, so next week we're going to keep an eye on, so RMI releasing results on Tuesday, so that should be quite interesting. And then Discovery. So Discovery's had a nice strong run, since it was listed really, but if you look at it over the last 12 months, they've really recovered to those 145 Rand level. So not looking exactly cheap at the moment. So I don't know if I'd be picking it up, but certainly a very interesting business. It's always wonderful listening to Adrian Gore speaking about his business, very passionate and obviously incredibly knowledgeable, and we'll be obviously looking for how they've bedded sort of down their JVs obviously in the East, and how the business in the UK and the US are going. So enough for us to keep us busy anyway.
Thanks so much for joining us. Have a lovely weekend. Kyle Burgess, Portfolio Manager at Nedbank Private Wealth. More Power Lunch right after this.